users. This is something that we're just really starting to peel the curtain around, but we think it's important. I think it's going to be very important for all of you. You guys already know that social is a very important driver to why someone would visit a location, right? Events, clusters of groups, visiting your location. That's a very important part of the LBE experience. We think that's also very important in the content that you create for your LBEs. So I encourage everyone to really think about how social becomes a differentiator in the total product offering. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and we have probably about 5 minutes for questions. A couple of resources. Obviously, I've been talking a lot about our consumer study and our consumer report and data set. I think it's fast. It's probably the best, most detailed, continuous study out there. We have one of our information services focuses on LBE specifically, so tracking the locations, the changes in capacity utilization, changes in the technology that cater. We build that into a service line and offer that. If anyone's interested in learning any more about any of those two things or anything at all about Greenlight, my email is right here at the bottom, and I'll be around obviously for some time today. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about anything I presented on or anything else. Your hand is up first. Yeah. Yeah. I do think you can measure the willingness to spend on a different deployment set. The way that we do it is we ask people in our surveys of those 6 types of experiences, how much are you willing to spend, and then calculate a mean price per one. And we do know that there is a difference between the 6 in terms of how that, so the clusters of it. I could talk to you more about that, but yes, we think there is a difference between that high end of spectrum, very interactive, expensive solution set, and the kind of lower end off the shelf solution set. It's not as pronounced as you would think, but I'm sure that'll change. And an important thing is to say is it's a snapshot in time, right? 12 months from now, the world can be very different. There can be a wide gulf, or those prices could be completely depressed. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Teaching people. Yeah. 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 We query. There are a certain sort of number of questions devoted to understanding social within our survey set. And so like the next few questions are drilled down into, well, is that, what's the nature of that social experience? Is it a, video-based communication? Is it an avatar-based communication? Is it, with family and friends? Is it with strangers, etc.? So there's a nuance of it that has to be understood and unpacked. Can't do that in a short presentation, but yes, I would say that there are, asking that second order question is really important for implementation of any kind. I'm sorry for pointing, by the way. Yeah. I think, you know, if you were to talk to the vast majority of operators who've been in the space for, you know, more than 12 months, you know, if they started as an arcade, they probably added a offering, you know, that complements our, you know, that core arcade offering. I think it's not necessarily about VR, the technology in particular, and more about the you know, the experience that one would have at your arcade. And so, leading with that, I think one better helps consumers choose, and is just like a better economic model. Sure, sure. So, um, you know, store tracking. We have, you know, a lot of good insight based on like public store data, um, and then we have survey based data, and so sometimes those two are in conflict, and sometimes uh, there are insights that you glean from looking at them in comparison. In general, what we have found, you know, is um, the um, so PC tethered gaming, people who over-index on you know, PC gaming, they understand the value proposition and they're willing to spend a lot on virtual reality content. Um, but so will creative technologists, or people who you know, self-report enjoying creative um, activities, or employed in a creative profession. They also have a really high level of awareness of intended use and spend. So I'd say, you know, it's not just, you know, a question of male versus female, but it's also really, you should think about the kind of psychographics that um, kind of define sort of the best users. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. That's in our questionnaire and in our reporting for sure. And we break that down by owner versus non-owner, male, female demographics, um, income. Hey, hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, a great resource, greenlightinsights.com/methodologies. I think we're, you know, it's important to sort of publish your methodology set. So on one hand, you know, if anyone is uh, you know, our forecasts are built on assumptions that are, we gather data around those assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions are from the data sets that we collect. Sometimes that's from direct input from um, venue, not venue, uh, vendors, and sometimes from venue operators. As it relates to LBE, the LBE space, what's one thing that we do is we track a panel of venues across a few territories. We track for changes in, you know, capacity utilization, etc., um, as well as survey-based research. So it's you really need a kind of a few different methodologies to come up with your estimates. Um, I think the one thing that is important in this space, because the technology is changing so quickly, is that there is a case of revisiting forecasts, and we make sure that we do that and then communicate that to our end clients. Generally, people find that we're on the more conservative estimate size of things. When we started our company, um, it's about 18 months before we ever issued a forecast. We had done lots of consumer surveys and industry surveys. Um, and so we think we have a really good understanding on the space, that combines a number of different methodologies. Um, uh, did I ask you a question? Yeah. Sorry. We'll go here and then we'll go here. Uh, let's see. So on the business model front, to keep your expense ratio low, keep your staffing low. Um, it's obvious. Um, I think, sort of thinking about the sort of total um, experience that you provide someone who's separate from the VR deployment, I think would be really, really important. So, when I say social, I think it's not just in the content offering, but in the broader sort of experience. Um, I could probably keep going on different nuggets. Okay. Yeah, cater to groups, have unique things that give a reason to come in. Event marketing essentially. Cool. And then I'm gonna. Okay, last question. Yeah, so actually that's really interesting. So in the survey data, well, there are a few ways to look at it. You can look at the penetration and the change in penetration of these venues and where they're popping up, which we do. The consumer data sets, we break our sample into about 9 regional territories. Um, and so looking at the different clusters, generally the Northeast over-indexes on out-of-home entertainment, so does the Florida uh, area as well. Surprisingly, California doesn't seem to, uh, I would have expected that California would have, and the West Coast in general would have been, the top sort of regional area. I think that's largely due to sample, but also um, the difference in population densities. So when we've looked at metropolitan city dweller versus non-metropolitan city dweller, there are important differences as it relates to the LBE space. So that's how I'd answer the question: is go back, take a look at region, but also metropolitan versus non-metropolitan city dweller. I'm around, so we can absolutely continue talking. I want to be respectful of. Oh, go to greenlightinsights.com. You can research and data. You can buy any report. We have um, reports available. You can buy it and pull it down right away. Great question, though. Most important question. One quick plug. We worked with Jeremy on our conference in the fall. So for anyone who's interested in virtual reality and really the sort of the strategy behind it. We produced the virtual reality strategy conference in the fall. We really focus on sort of the changing big picture, what the implications are for strategic planners and executives in the space, and then we curate solutions that kind of help solve those. Um, we have a dedicated full day dedicated to the enterprise. We call it the Experiential Enterprise Summit. And then we have our own arcade summit as well, which Virtual World Arcade